Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1991 crime drama Rush. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Rush is one of those films that I caught on VHS a while back, and I remember it being a pretty compelling drama. So I was honestly really looking forward to revisiting this after all these years. And I gotta be honest, I was underwhelmed by it. Now, I'm not gonna say that I thought it was a bad movie. I just thought it was just kind of there, just kind of in the middle. And I think the reason for that is due to the fact that, ironically enough, the script does rush into some elements too much. And it just doesn't really have the same impact that I thought it had. And I genuinely felt that it just wasn't as strong of a drama or a thriller as it could be. It's like one of those movies after it's over just kind of rushes by you and it doesn't leave that much of a lasting impression. I think that's probably why the film isn't talked about that much by a lot of other critics or a lot of other people nowadays, and why it just kind of came and went when it came out in theaters in 1991. Because other than some strong central performances, there's just a lot of elements of this film that just are either lackluster or are just kind of mid. So it's directed by Lili, Fini, Zanuck, and I'm not gonna necessarily blame this film's flat and kind of dull and boring direction squarely on the shoulders of the director because they're a first time director, but I definitely don't feel that helped. I think that's definitely something that affected the way that the film was blocked and the way that shots were set up because of her limitations as a director. She didn't know how to block scenes any differently. So a lot of scenes just kind of run together. There are some moments where the direction has some style and flair, like the scene where Jason Leigh's character, she takes a pill and then gets high and she's driving down the road and she's just looking at the highway and it's all blurry, and the whole sequence is really well put together in terms of putting yourself in the shoes of this woman who's going through a pretty bad drug trip. But there's a lot of other scenes that are just very standard and don't really have that kind of style or that kind of flair. I think in large parts because there was more of a focus to be more gritty, to be more realistic. And on one hand, I get it. I think that does add to the film in some ways. But in other ways, I think it just makes the film visually uninteresting. It makes it not really that much different from like a reenactment from Unsolved Mysteries or some other kind of television movie that's based on a true story. If you look at this poster, you see like a lot of color and a lot of genuine style, and the movie doesn't reflect that at all. And I feel that that's a missed opportunity. I feel this film honestly would have benefited a lot more from a more established, a more prolific filmmaker, or maybe somebody who has a very unique visual style. Because this whole just standard, average visual style for a film that already has issues in terms of having a consistently compelling narrative, it it detracts from the movie because it makes the film visually just as mid or just as middling as other aspects of the production. And when you find out the only reason why Lili got the job is because her father was producing the movie and she said she wants to direct, and she said to him after they compiled a list of potential directors that she felt like she was the best person to direct this, it just makes things all the more, I wouldn't say frustrating, but disappointing for sure. Because you have this really potentially great period piece crime drama that's based on a true story that takes place during the late 70s, that deals with undercover narcotics cops who get too involved in their job to the point where they become addicts. And you get a director who's never directed anything before this. And after this, she didn't direct anything either. So this is her only film in her filmography. And then after this film was done, she just went back to producing. So it's like she treated this as just a little a thing that she could do for fun, basically, because of the position that she was in the industry. She's like, she could just pick a little indie project and just direct, and you know, get that out of her system. Kind of like what you would see from like a actor or actress doing a music album out of the blue, because they have all these resources and all these connections, but then they don't take it that seriously. If she went on to do more films and improved and became a better filmmaker, then I could give her a little bit more of a pass. But the fact that she just did this one movie and then never did anything again and just went back to doing producing, it just shows me that she didn't even really treat this film, in my opinion, with the utmost respect in terms of the project that I feel that it honestly deserved. She just looked at it as just something to do with her spare time. And she just mistakenly assumed that she could be a good director or a great director because she just thought that she would be. Not based on anything, not based on any prior experience, not based on second unit directing, not based on anything other than just a hunch. And like I said, there are some moments directing wise where it's not too bad. I think she did a good job in terms of capturing some genuinely authentic performances from the cast members. But there's a lot of establishing shots, a lot of other sequences in the film that are just very boxed in and limited. And it's in large part due to this director's lack of experience as a filmmaker. The script is written by Pete Dexter, based on a book by Kim Wozencraft. And I think the script does a few things really well. For one, I think it does a good job establishing the setting of the late 70s and just really creating that vibe very well. I think it definitely is one of those scripts that doesn't shy away from the intensity of the subject matter. It is willing to show these cops in the throes of addiction. It's willing to show the seedier and the darker side of law enforcement, to the point where you even have higher ups trying to get these undercover narcotics officers to plant evidence so they can nail the guy that they want to nail in Gaines. And I appreciated that. I appreciated that the script was willing to go there. So it's a screenplay that definitely is not afraid to get down and dirty. But it's a script that it fails in some very key areas of storytelling for me. While the performances by Jason Patric and Jason Leigh and Sam Elliott, for instance, are really good, the writing for these characters isn't as strong as it could be. There isn't as much depth to these characters. You don't know as much about them as I think this story really needed in order to make you really compelled and really enthralled by these characters and their journey together and their battle with drug addiction and drug dealers and with law enforcement. Because there's not really a lot of extra depth with these characters other than like surface level, it makes it harder to really connect with them. And especially when it comes to the case of Jason Patric's character, Jim Raynor. Like, you barely even know anything about this guy. You just know that he's an undercover narcotics officer. And at a certain point, he just becomes addicted to drugs. And at face value, that's something that is inherently tragic. A narcotics officer goes undercover, and because of the a job that he's doing, it leads to him being addicted to the same drugs that he's trying to uh, prevent from hurting other people by putting the drug dealers in jail. But other than that, like, face value stuff, it doesn't really go any deeper than that. It also doesn't help that there's this like love story that's supposed to be at not necessarily the forefront, but it's definitely meant to be a significant part of the story involving Jim and Kristen. And you never buy the love story. It just feels manufactured. It doesn't feel like it's earned. It just feels like it's there because you're just trying to make these two more compelling, but it's not done in a way that's that effective. It's just like, oh, hey, these two are now in love with one another. But it doesn't really resonate that strongly when it comes to the feelings that they share for each other. It just seems like it's an obligation when it comes to the script and the story. And I definitely do feel the love story element of this was very rushed. Another element that I feel isn't that effective is there's not really a genuine antagonist. Like, you think it's Gaines, and everything that about this character is set up in a way that he's supposed to be this kind of mysterious figure, this drug dealer that Jim and Kristen are trying to bust. But once again, you know nothing about this guy. There's zero depth to this character. He's supposed to be intimidating, but you rarely ever see him do anything intimidating other than talk real sternly to people, and that's about it. So you don't buy him as an intimidating presence. You don't buy him as an intimidating foe. And the police department, the way that things are written with them, and they're involving with the mayor and all of this, it's so vague that they aren't really clear antagonists either. So there's no real antagonist here. So it just makes for a story that is kind of stuck in a drug haze and just sitting there. As if, you know, the script itself was injected with heroin and it's just like sitting there in a chair and not really going anywhere. Because you don't really have a compelling overall story. It's just a generic story about two cops that are undercover and trying to bust some drug dealer. And every now and then they go to these other dealers' places and buy some drugs or do drugs. And that's about it. There are moments where they will go in and they'll give some cases. They'll give some drugs and some names and stuff like that to the cops and get some more money back from the cops. And there's a whole stuff at the end when they compile their case and they bust Gaines. But then, because Gaines has all this power and everything, he finds a way to get out of prison. Well, actually, he gets bail. You get the whole idea that these two cops are now in danger. Their lives are endangered because now all the people that they busted, they know who they are. They know that they're cops and that they weren't actually who they said they were. There's this other stuff involving this other guy who was working with Jim and Walker, who was getting him drugs. He eventually gets brought into the undercover operation, but then he can't live with what is happening with the fallout in terms of his friends getting put to jail and the idea of him going on the run, so he takes his own life by the end of the movie. I guess when it comes to like depth, or when it comes to a character, I would say he's probably the one that has the most. But at the same time, it's still rather surface level. You don't really know that much about these people, other than the fact that one is a drug dealer and the other two are undercover cops. That's really about it. For a film that's trying to be so gritty and so realistic and raw and human, it's surprisingly distant when it comes to its characterization. And the ending of the film, it's sad when it comes to the ultimate demise of Jim. But if you think about it, because of all the drugs that he did and how genuinely messed up he was before he went cold turkey, he probably was already gone before that moment anyway. Uh, so it's sad, but it's not devastating because I never really connected with that character on a deeper level. And the whole stuff involving Kristen and her leaving the force and then her getting revenge for the death of Jim, but in a way that's not satisfying at all because you don't really know whether or not it was her, and it happens off screen anyway. So it's like you build up this villain, this drug dealer in Gaines, to be this absolute scumbag who is essentially the guy who killed her partner. And then you do some art house ending where somebody shoots him from the back of his car with a shotgun, but you don't see the aftermath, and then it cuts to end credit. It just cuts to the credits. It's just not satisfying. And there's a lot of elements of the script that are just unsatisfying. And it just feels like a waste of potential, a waste of what could have been a really compelling drama if it just had better writing for these characters to really flesh them out and really make them feel like they're real people. And then at the same time, show their gradual descent into drug addiction in a way that is also more compelling. Because even that felt a little surface level for me. Like it's just, oh, now they're doing more drugs. Now a Jim's gone away for a while, and now he's been doing all the drugs. Like you see some gradual signs that he might be, taking things a little too far in terms of like taking some cocaine, saving it for later, doing the heroin. But even the scene when he does the heroin, it's like, well, he had to because he was essentially he had a gun pointed at him by this drug dealer, so he had to do the drugs. But so you would think, okay, well then maybe it would be heroin, but then he just gets addicted to everything, and you're just like, can we see those scenes? Why does it have to happen off screen? Can we see the gradual descent into drug addiction instead of just the aftermath and the recovery? It's just that just felt like a cop out for a film that's trying to focus on the trials and the tribulations of undercover narcotics officers who are trying to ride this fine line when it comes to their jobs. To just see the aftermath of it just felt a little, it felt like the script kind of cheated you in a way. And I'm not saying you don't see moments where they're drugged out. I mean, you see that with Kristen when she takes that pill and she's completely just passing out in the phone booth later. But that's like the extent of it, really. You see Jim freaking out after he's done all these drugs and has essentially isolated himself. But other than that, you don't really see the other moments when he's shooting up or he's doing the drugs or anything. It's not because, oh, I want to see rampant drug use. It's because that's a major part of his story, and to just not show it is just kind of, it just feels like you're deliberately choosing not to be as impactful of a story as you genuinely could be. It would be so much more tragic and so much more compelling to see the the gradual descent into drug addiction and to see it firsthand instead of just little bits and pieces. And if you just make the love story a lot more effective, like just have moments where the two of them bond with one another a little bit more. You know, like the scene when they're shooting beer cans. Do more of that throughout the movie. So then you have moments like that where the two become endearing, not only to the audience but towards each other. Then when they fall for one another, then it actually feels like something that's genuine. So then when you get to the ending, when you get to Kirsten finding Jim all strung out, it's so much more effective. It's so much more powerful emotionally. When you get to the ending of the film, when Jim gets shot in the leg and he essentially bleeds out and dies, that actually is a moment that becomes a genuine tearjerker instead of a moment that makes you just kind of a little bit sad and bummed out because of just the context of everything, of the idea of this narcotics cop who was just doing his job, and then things spiraled out of control and he got addicted to drugs, and then after he got clean, he still isn't able to live a normal life because he gets shot and dies. Like that's sad. But it's not as devastating as it could be if you really got to know these characters more and really became invested in their passion for one another. And also, just a better antagonist would definitely help too. William Sadler is in this in one scene as like a guy who's selling pills. He should have been the villain. He should have been the main antagonist because he has that kind of presence about him, and he's a great actor. So I think that would have helped a lot as well. A better, more clear antagonist, a stronger love story, and just more of an emphasis and more of a focus on the drug addiction and less of the hanging around, doing the stuff with the other guy, and getting him involved in Walker, and going to the bar and just hanging out. You know, more scenes where stuff is actually happening would also help as well. Maybe another, maybe a shootout in one scene, maybe a car chase, something to kind of just break up the monotony of the story. Uh, because for a film called Rush, it's not really a rush. It doesn't provide that rush that the people that do these drugs are talking about. I think this should have been like more like genuinely kind of cocaine fueled and amped up, and I really feel that would have benefited the film a ton, but I don't really feel that this director was capable of doing that. Now, the film genuinely has, in my opinion, a great cast for the most part. And I think the performances by the bulk of the cast members in this are definitely the biggest highlights of the film. You've got Jason Patric, who plays Jim Raynor, and it's easily one of his best acting performances. This is Jason Patric showing that he's more than just the kid from the Lost Boys. And he's showing a lot of range here, showing his character be a believable guy who's looking for drugs. You can understand why people who are in the industry of dealing drugs would buy that he's not a cop initially because of the way that he carries himself. And when it comes to the cop elements of his character, that also is something that is equally as believable and strong. But the best parts of his acting is when he's strung out, paranoid, or he's recovering from a drug addiction. He's going cold turkey. Like, the acting from Patric in those scenes is tremendous. And he had brought this intensity to the performance too that was incredible. So yeah, Jason Patric was really good in this. I just wish it was a better script that he had to work with, and he had a better director at the helm. Because I think his performance would probably be equally as good with a different director. Interestingly enough, another actor who's known for doing a lot of intense roles and for a while was typecast because of his looks was initially tabbed to play this role, and it was Tom Cruise. But Tom Cruise, he passed on it because of all the drug use, which is interesting because there isn't really as much drug use as you might think. It's implied, and you see the aftermath, but you don't actually see him doing the drugs, other than him shooting up one time, maybe snorting a little bit of coke. But I'm glad Jason Patric got the role, though, because it enabled him to really show people that he's not just a one-trick pony when it comes to being an actor. Jennifer Jason Leigh was also great. She was equally as phenomenal to me personally as Jason Patric. This is also one of her best performances. I thought she was very authentic. I bought her as this fledgling police officer who decides to take this job and go undercover despite not really necessarily knowing everything that goes along with it, not really understanding the sacrifices that might have to be made. And the way that she goes from this naive narcotics officer who's just really happy to be working in the field to being disillusioned to being amped, being wired, to becoming just something alien to her, just a completely different character and persona, is a really strong and effective transition. And she just makes everything just work so well when it comes to this character. There's a certain point in this film where she is essentially the main character because Jim is sidelined for a good chunk of the movie. And she actually does a good job carrying it. Sam Elliott was excellent as Captain Larry Dodd. Small role, but he makes the most of it. I also liked Max Perlich as Walker, this eccentric, just kind of, I don't know if out there is the right word, but he's, redneck personality, the kind of guy you might see on King of the Hill, who's working with Jim and Kristen. Initially, he's just a dealer, but then he eventually works with them. You've got like Tony Frank, who plays Chief Nettle, who's the guy who's really trying to get Will Gaines busted. William Sadler is a very small role, but a very memorable role as Monroe. You also have another actor I don't remember what his name is. Yeah, Dennis Berkeley. He plays one of the motorcycle guys, and he was in Suburban Commando. He was the one that told Hulk Hogan, this is the 90s. We're going to sue you. Like, it was fun to see him again, but it was a small role. And then you have Gregg Allman, the rock singer, who plays Will Gaines. I get what they were trying to go for here when it comes to this casting. But to me, it was a gimmick stunt casting, and I think it was a mistake. Because Gregg Allman, if you listen to the interviews, like, he had a hard time learning his dialogue, and you can kind of tell. Like, it's not really that great of a performance. He's just there. And on one hand, I don't completely blame him, because the way that character is written, there's not a lot for any actor to work with. But at the same time, he doesn't really do anything to leave a lasting impression. He's supposed to be this tough, imposing figure, and I just never really bought it. So I don't really think that was the best casting choice. But when it comes to the main cast, some great work. Now, the cinematography by Kenneth McMillan is meh. It's fine. So is the editing by Mark Warner. The music by Eric Clapton, which that's interesting that it says music by Eric Clapton. Stuart Copeland did the score. And there is a song by Eric Clapton in the soundtrack, Tears in Heaven, which is a great song. But I don't really feel that song fits that well with this movie. Because like I said, it's not really a story that is as emotionally impactful as it could be. So when you throw in the Tears in Heaven song at the end, which is a song about devastating emotional loss, because there's a song about Eric Clapton's son who died falling out of a window. And it feels a little superficial because of the fact that Jim's death just didn't really seem like it was on the same level emotionally. It's a great song, though. And there's some other songs of the soundtrack I didn't mind as well. The film's like 120 minutes, and there are times where it does drag, especially in the first hour, a little bit in the third act. It's just one of those movies where I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a bad film. It isn't. I said that at the beginning of this review. But I just thought it was a mid movie. It was fine. It wasn't anything fantastic. Wasn't anything spectacular. It could have been. But it just lacked those certain elements to really put it over the top. But anyway, thanks for watching my review of Rush. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.